Good evening, everybody, or whatever time it is where you are logging in. My name is Charlene Margot, and I am the co-founder of nonprofit The Parent Venture, the organization that brings you this program, the Parent Education Series. We are so delighted to have you with us tonight for Dr. Kendall Bronk in discussion of how parents can help students discover their purpose in life. Again, this is such a timely topic, and we know how important it is. More than 900 of you registered for this event, which is almost a record for us and really shows that the topic is important and the timeliness is important. So Dr. Bronk will be talking a little bit more about that tonight. We're just so glad to have you all with us. But before I get started, a couple of quick thank yous. This presentation tonight is sponsored by the Fremont Union High Schools Foundation Parent Resource Network. We have with us the board president, Rita Allen, for a couple of comments, and also the Homestead High School PTSA and Monte Vista High School PTSA. We are very grateful for your sponsorship of this wonderful event. Thank you all. So again, most of you are familiar with Zoom by now. This is a webinar format, so there will be two ways for you, the audience, to engage with us. You have both the chat button and the Q&A. In the chat, you will see resource links that my co-founder, Bev Hartman, will be putting in. So look at the chat for resources. You can comment to each other. You can comment to us. And then we'd like you to put your questions in the Q&A. You can do that anytime during the presentation. We will allow about 15 minutes at the end of the program for question and answer period. Dr. Bronk will be speaking for about 45 minutes, and then again, we'll be taking your questions. At the very end of the evening, you will see a short survey link in the chat. We hope you'll take a minute to fill that out. If we were in person, I'd be handing you little pieces of paper, which you would hand back, but it really does help us both for future planning and for our sponsors. So we appreciate it if you would do that. Tonight's event is going to be video recorded and will be available soon on our free video library, which is our YouTube channel. With more than 40,000 views, we know that this has been an important resource for parents, especially since the start of the pandemic. So again, check that out, and thank you all for being here. Let me tell you a little bit about tonight's featured presenter. Dr. Kendall Cotton Bronk is a professor of psychology in the Division of Behavioral and Social Sciences at Claremont Graduate University, one of the Claremont colleges in Southern California. She is a developmental scientist interested in understanding and supporting the positive development and moral growth of young people. Most recently, she has investigated these topics through the lens of young people's purpose in life. Work in her Adolescent Moral Development Lab is focused on addressing two primary questions around purpose. First, what does purpose look like among diverse groups of young people, including youth growing up amidst global economic challenges? Second, how can we help youth discover the things that give their lives purpose? Dr. Bronk has published extensively on purpose and positive youth development in leading peer-reviewed journals and books, and her research has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, NBC, Education Nation, and NPR. Please join me in a really warm virtual welcome for Dr. Kendall Bronk. Thank you, Kendall.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm going to share my screen here and see if we can get the slideshow started. All right. So I wanted to start by saying, thank you so much for joining the conversation, this discussion tonight. There's so much going on in the world, and I think that this conversation around purpose is actually pretty relevant. My goal here tonight is to talk a little bit about the research going on in this space and to even try to offer some strategies that you can use to help the young people in your life figure out the things that are most meaningful to them, and so that they'll have something pulling them forward in a positive direction through challenging times like the ones we find ourselves in today. So I will go ahead and get started. So my plan for this evening is to start with a definition of purpose. What exactly do I mean when I talk about purpose? In particular, I'm going to focus on how we define this construct in the scholarly literature when we're conducting scientific research on it. Second, I want to talk a little bit about why this is something that I think is important for parents to be thinking about really at any time, but maybe particularly in circumstances like the ones that we find ourselves in today. So why should we care about cultivating purpose in the lives of our young people? And then third, I want to talk to you a little bit about the research that we've been doing on purpose, and particularly highlight some of the strategies that we have found that can be really helpful, really effective for helping young people figure out what it is that they really want to accomplish in their lives. So with that, let's get started. I want to start with a story about an individual named Viktor Frankel, excuse me. Viktor Emil Frankel was born on March 26 in 1905. He was born on the top floor of his family's home in Vienna, Austria, to parents who were Jewish civil servants. By all accounts, he was a really bright and inquisitive child who was both deeply emotional and at the same time deeply rational. Those who knew him well psychology. And as an adult, he went on to work as both a professor of psychiatry as well as a professor of neurology, both at the University of Vienna. And in these roles, he began working on research and on a book about purpose and its role in human well-being. This book, it really went on to become his life's work. At the age of 36, he met and married the love of his life, Tilly Grosser. It was 1941, and just a few months later, the couple was really overjoyed to find out that they were expecting their first child. However, only a few months after this, the couple was arrested by the Nazis. World War II was well underway. Tilly was forced to abort their child, and she and Viktor were taken off to Auschwitz. The Nazis seized and destroyed the manuscript that Frankel was working on, his book on purpose. And Frankel remained at Auschwitz for several months, but his wife Tilly was quickly moved to another camp. She was moved to Bergen-Belsen, where sadly, really tragically, she died at the age of only 24. Unaware of his wife's fate, Viktor spent the next 3 years in 4 different concentration camps. And he used the time in his camps to really study the people that he came into contact with. And he learned that something more about purpose. He learned that people can withstand an awful lot if they have a reason to live. So he noticed that of those people who did have the chance to survive, those who usually managed to go on, they generally did have a strong sense of purpose. So he later wrote about this idea in the non-degenderized language of the day. He wrote, quote, "A man who becomes conscious of the responsibility he bears toward a human being who affectionately waits for him or to an unfinished work will never be able to throw away his life. He knows the why for his existence, and he'll be able to bear almost any how." So Frankel used his knowledge around the power of purpose to really keep himself going too. While he was in the concentration camps, he came down with typhoid fever, and to keep himself awake and alert, he started rewriting his manuscript on pieces of paper that he would steal or find. And finishing his book and returning to his wife, he of course didn't know that she had died. They really gave him a reason to live. Those goals became the purpose for his life. And on April 27th, 1945, the final camp that Viktor Frankel was in was liberated by the Americans, and he was freed. So upon being freed from the concentration camp, Viktor was finally able to pen and publish his book on purpose. I find this so remarkable. He wrote the book in only 9 days, having thought it through so carefully while he was a prisoner. Man's Search for Meaning was published in Austria in 1946. Since then, the book has been translated into 24 languages, and it sold more than 10 million copies. The Library of Congress identifies it as one of the 10 most influential books in this country. So I love this story, and I share the story of Frankel with you because his life story and his purpose, they've really inspired my own. His early book on purpose served as an important catalyst for the broader field of psychological research on the construct. So we owe a debt of gratitude to Frankel's early work. So I want to talk a little bit about how I've tried to build on some of Frankel's ideas around purpose. As you heard earlier, I'm a professor at the Claremont Graduate University, where I run a research lab called the Adolescent Moral Development Lab. And really one of the things that has motivated the work that we do is fleshing out some of Frankel's ideas and really testing and extending them, especially among adolescents and young adults. So Frankel published his book in 1946, but research on his ideas didn't really take hold until about 20 years ago, when William Damon, who happened to be my graduate school advisor at Stanford, when he really decided to investigate the topic further and from more of a scientific perspective. One of the first things we needed in order to conduct scientific research on purpose was a really clear definition of the construct. We needed a definition that we could operationalize in empirical research. So of course, we all have our own understanding of what it means to lead a life of purpose and what it looks like to lead a life of purpose. But in order to come up with a definition that could be operationalized in research, we propose the following. A purpose in life is a long-term, forward-looking intention to accomplish something that is personally meaningful and inspired by a desire to make a difference in the broader world. So let me highlight a few really key components of this definition. The first is that a purpose, it's a goal of sorts. It's not a short-term objective, but more of a long-term aim. So, rather than I want to ace this test this week, it might be I want to really do well in school so that I can get engaged in scientific work looking for, cures for rare diseases. That might be more of a long-term sort of aim that could inspire purpose. So that's the first part. It's really a goal, a long-term sort of goal of sorts. The second component of this definition that I want to highlight is that it's not just any kind of goal, it's a goal that's really personally meaningful. It comes from within. It's something, it provides a young person with a sense of like a compass, pointing them in a particular direction, orienting them in a particular direction. So it's personally significant, in fact, that individuals are generally willing to invest their time and their effort and their energy and their other personal resources towards making progress toward it. So we look for that evidence that young people aren't just talking about this long-term goal, but they're actually working to make it a reality. So first, it's goal-oriented. Second, it's a goal that's particularly personally meaningful. And then third, it's inspired, at least in part, by a desire to make a difference or to make a contribution to the broader world. So in this way, a purpose isn't just about achieving a meaningful goal because of what it can do for the individual, but also for what it can allow the individual to do for others or for some other aspect of the world. And so in this way, there's a really important external element of purpose. And that's, like I said, this motivation to contribute, to give back, or to make a positive difference in the broader world. So taking this together, we find purpose when we apply our talents and our skills to address really personally meaningful issues in the broader world. And based on this definition, our research finds that young people today, they tend to pursue a really broad range of purposeful activities. Some find purpose in creating works of art that change the way that people think. Other young people find purpose in pursuing careers that enable them to make a personally meaningful difference in the broader world. Still others find purpose in contributing to their communities, or in following the tenets of their religious beliefs, or in supporting social and political change. So hopefully you can see there's lots of different ways of pursuing a purpose in life. All right, so now that we've established what a purpose is, I want to talk a little bit about some of the early research on this construct that suggests that maybe this is something we should care about. We should care about cultivating a purpose. So Frankel, as you heard when I talked about his story, he really focused on the role that purpose played in survival. And his ideas are supported by broad empirical research that finds that individuals with purpose, they tend to report lower levels of anxiety, lower levels of loneliness, depression, and isolation. So this is incredibly important stuff, especially in the midst of a global pandemic. That's a hard word to say, pandemic, excuse me, and in the midst of all that's really going on these days. But beyond that, it turns out that not only does leading a life of purpose help people survive, but it can also really help them thrive. So for instance, research on purpose finds that compared to individuals who lack a purpose in their lives, those with purpose are likely to experience better psychological health. Recent studies have determined that compared to others, individuals with a clear sense of purpose, they tend to be more hopeful, they display more positive affect, and they report higher levels of life satisfaction. Now, given that purpose is associated with psychological well-being, maybe it shouldn't be terribly surprising to learn that it's actually also associated with better physical health. So recent empirical research finds that purpose is associated with a broad range of physical health benefits, including things like improved cardiovascular functioning, lower levels of chronic pain, and better sleep. I love that finding. People with purpose actually experience fewer sleep disturbances at night, meaning they sleep more restfully than individuals without purpose. So it's all of this research I think is really interesting. It's maybe not as remarkable as a recent study that found that individuals with purpose actually live longer lives than individuals who lack purpose. Now, most of this research is correlational in nature, and so it could be the case that purpose contributes to good health, or maybe it could be the case that good health contributes to the development of purpose. However, some new research suggests that it's really likely to be the case that purpose contributes to this good health. This research was really looking at the epigenetic effects of leading a life of purpose. And what they found is that the different ways that we experience life, it actually influences our genetic expression. And leading a life of purpose changes individuals' genetic profiles in health-sustaining ways. So I think that's one clear indication that purpose isn't just correlated with positive health outcomes, but likely contributes to them. Now, the physical health outcomes are more long-term indicators of well-being, and for our young people, we're not as worried usually about some of these issues. But what we are often particularly concerned about are academic issues. And it tends to be the case that individuals with purpose, they also tend to do better in school. So for instance, studies find that young people with purpose compared to their peers, they report higher levels of grit, meaning they're more willing to stick with the hard stuff. When you know why it is that you're working hard, that hard work doesn't seem quite so stressful, and you're better equipped to stick with it and to enjoy it, not to find it so stress-inducing. In addition to grit, we also find that young people with purpose tend to be more resilient, meaning they're better prepared than their peers to bounce back from the challenges that they confront at school or in life more generally. So I hope I've convinced you at this point that the research is really pretty clear. Leading a life of purpose is a good thing. It's associated with a wide range and even appears to contribute to a wide range of positive outcomes. So for these reasons, I hope you'll agree, leading a life of purpose is something that we should seek to encourage in the young people in our lives. So despite the benefits of leading a life of purpose, research suggests that it's actually fairly rare. According to research that my colleagues and I conducted at the Stanford Center on Adolescence, only about 1 in 10 early adolescents can articulate a clear purpose for their life. 1 in 5 high schoolers, and about 1 in 3 young adults, so young people in their 20s, can articulate a clear purpose in life. So as you can see, across the span of adolescence and young adulthood, the experience of purpose is really the exception rather than the rule. So I'm going to talk more in a little bit about some strategies we can use to help the young people in our lives develop purpose. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about for whom is it appropriate to be thinking about purpose. Purpose is a long-term endeavor. You can lead a life of purpose from adolescence onward, and it's never too late to discover your purpose in life. But for a variety of reasons, I think adolescence represents a particularly appropriate time to think about the cultivation of purpose. So with younger children, and I am going to talk about some strategies for sort of setting the stage for purpose development among younger children. But for younger children, they're not really cognitively equipped to establish a clear sense of purpose in life. They haven't experienced, the broad range of things that we want them to experience before they start making these decisions. And they aren't equipped cognitively to engage in the hypothetical deductive reasoning that purpose requires. However, adolescents really, they are. And one of the hallmarks of adolescent development is identity development. So young people from in adolescence are really interested in figuring out, who am I and who do I want to become? Identity development is the primary developmental milestone of adolescence. And during this stage, young people, they look out into the world around them to see where they fit in and to see who they want to be and what role they want to play in the world. So at the same time that young people are reflecting on who they are, the identity question, many also tend to reflect on what it is they want to accomplish in their lives, which is really the purpose question. In fact, there's a lot of research to suggest that those questions are inextricably intertwined, and that the answer to both of those questions can actually be pretty similar. Who you are is often defined by what it is you want to accomplish in your life. So for those reasons, I think it's really appropriate to think about the development of purpose among adolescents. Now, if you happen to tune in with younger children, I will talk in a little later about some strategies that you can use to help prepare your younger person, your child, to think about purpose when they're ready to do so. So hang in there, I'm getting to that. So what I thought I'd do here is now move into a little bit of the research that we've conducted on purpose, and just to give you a flavor of what kinds of things we're looking at with regards to purpose among adolescents. So I think at the beginning, in the introduction, it was noted that what does purpose look like among diverse groups of young people is a question that's really animated a lot of research that we've conducted in our research lab. And so one of the early studies that we conducted, or one of the more recent studies, I should say, looked at purpose among young people from low resource or low income backgrounds. A lot of research suggests that young people from more challenging backgrounds, maybe you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which suggests that until people have met the more basic needs in their life, things like food and security and safety, they're really unlikely to focus on self-actualizing aims, such as finding a purpose for your life. So that kind of research might suggest that purpose is really rare among young people from challenging backgrounds. On the other hand, right, we have that story of Viktor Frankel, who talked about purpose among concentration camp inmates. And it's hard to imagine a lower resourced or more challenging context than a concentration camp. And his example suggests that purpose really thrived there. So in this study, we were really curious to see, do youth from low resource backgrounds lead lives of purpose with the same frequency as young people from more middle class backgrounds? And is purpose associated with the same indicators of well-being among young people from these more challenging backgrounds? And by and large, what we found was pretty inspiring. We found that rates of purpose did not differ among young people from more challenging socioeconomic backgrounds and among young people from more middle income backgrounds. So that's to say that the rates of purpose were statistically the same. There was no statistical difference. I also sort of went through that litany of all of these positive benefits of leading a life of purpose. A lot of that research was conducted with young people from more middle income backgrounds. So in this study, we wanted to see, is purpose associated with the same benefits among young people from challenging backgrounds as socioeconomic backgrounds, I should say, as it is for young people from more middle income backgrounds. And what we found was, yes, it's very much the same. There are a lot of the same benefits associated with leading a life of purpose, regardless of the young person's socioeconomic background. So that would suggest that purpose looks really quite similar, regardless of the young person's income background or socioeconomic background. But then we also did some interviews where we asked about the path to purpose. How did young people discover their purposes for their lives? And here we found some interesting differences. A lot of the young people from more middle income backgrounds, they tended to focus on things like their image of an ideal world. And this gave them a sense of inspiration to go out and to pursue a purpose in life. Young people from more challenging socioeconomic backgrounds, they tend to focus on the problems and the challenges that they were encountering in their lives. They talked about racism, sexism, immigration status, things like this, challenges that really could have thwarted their pursuit of purpose. But when they had access to an adult or an institution in their life that could help them find meaning in addressing these challenges, they instead served as catalysts for the development of purpose. So we interviewed a young woman who talked a lot about how she had experienced racism in her life, and it was a very demoralizing experience, but she got connected with a group of really civically engaged students on campus and with a very supportive teacher who guided this group. And they talked a lot about, what steps could we take to help improve circumstances at this school and beyond for young, individuals from ethnic minority backgrounds. And this young woman, when we interviewed her, she talked a lot about how she wanted to go on to enter life of politics. She was getting ready to graduate from high school, applying to colleges with the plan of pursuing a pre-law degree, and she wanted to go work in politics so that she could try to make a contribution to society that would help improve treatment of ethnic minority individuals. So we found that to be pretty inspiring. So I guess the point to take away from this is that it can be positive experiences that inspire purposes, but it can also be challenging experiences, especially when those challenging experiences are coupled with an adult who can help the young person make sense of and find meaning in those challenging circumstances. Okay, so some people were surprised that we found that rates of purpose were really very much the same, regardless of socioeconomic background. And some people actually suggested maybe we didn't look at a population that was quite strapped enough, right? They didn't come from a poor enough background. So we ended up conducting some research in Liberia. And at least based on the 2019 GDP, Liberia was one of the 5th poorest countries in the world. And while we were here, we interviewed street children. And again, we found over and over stories of purpose. So our study there now is focused more on positive youth development and what it means to thrive in a Liberian context. But we were really heartened to find plenty of examples of purpose, even among street children living in one of the world's poorest countries. So although this is not to say we shouldn't take steps to try to improve the context in which young people live, I certainly advocate for that. It is to suggest that purpose, it can take root and bloom even in much more challenging contexts. All right, so another line of study, another way in which we've focused on purpose is among family purpose. We've been really interested in looking not just at individuals who develop a purpose for their lives, but families that develop a shared collective vision for how it is that they want to conduct themselves and use their skills and their talents and their resources to make a difference in the broader world. This study is still underway, so I don't have a ton of findings to share with you yet, But I do think one thing that's really neat is that families that talk about their shared purpose, one of the very clear findings that seems to be emerging is that they tend to be very cohesive. They tend to be very close family members. It makes sense, right? If they're all on the same page about what it is they're trying to accomplish as a family, how they want to make a positive difference in the world, they're likely to have to get along with one another. They're all so much on the same page. Another study that we conducted not too long ago was looking at purpose among youth living in economic crisis. And I think that these circumstances that we did this study following or in the midst of the Great Recession. So we gathered the data in 2016. And gosh, that feels like a million years ago. But if you remember in 2016, although we were well on our way to economic recovery here in the US by then, but Greece was not. They were still very mired down in the details of the Great Recession. There was a real economic crisis. There was talk of a potential Grexit. And at the same time, there were refugees streaming in from Syria and other Middle Eastern countries. So Greece was in a really tough spot. There were a lot of economic changes underway, and the economy was not good. And so, even though it was a little later than the Great Recession here in the US, I went to Greece, moved there for a little while, and spent some time conducting a study looking at the way that the Great Recession and the economic and political change, the way that it shaped young people's views of the future and their sense of purpose in life. And what we found again were lots of instances of purpose. So even in the midst of chaos and economic challenge and political uncertainty, there were a lot of individuals with purpose. And the individuals with purpose tended to be very resilient. They were able to look past the difficult circumstances and to still anticipate a brighter future. They were not less educated about the crisis. They knew every bit as much as the young people who lacked purpose, but they seemed to be able to take it in stride. And they would say things like, "I'm just going to have to work that much harder." And they really talked a lot about how they felt a sense of responsibility to their family members, to the people in their communities, and also to their country more broadly. And that's where they derived this sense of purpose, this sense of, responsibility. I can do this, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to make things better. The interviews were really striking. When we interviewed young people without purpose, they were really in survival mode, and they'd say things like, "Well, sure, normally I'd be really concerned about trying to make the world a better place, but right now I just have to look out for myself. I just have to take any job I can get, and that will put, food on the table, and be okay with that." So it was really, the contrast was really quite stark. And it was clear that young people, that having this sense of purpose pulled the young people along in a positive direction that enabled them to much better navigate the circumstances they were living through. So another study that more or less came to a somewhat similar conclusion was conducted with adolescent and young adult cancer survivors. So research with older adults suggests that when people feel that the future time horizon, it's looking shorter, they start to realize that they have little time left in their life. They are naturally inclined to reflect both on the people who matter most to them and on the things that matter most to them. And we wondered if maybe the same might not be true for adolescents and young adults. Research suggests that when they are diagnosed with cancer, they tend to start to wonder if maybe their future time horizon isn't shorter, just as happens with older adults naturally as a result of aging. And so we interviewed young people to try to understand what difference the cancer diagnosis might make to their pursuit of purpose and how they think about the future. We learned that recognizing that their future time horizon might be shorter, it did encourage many of the young people to reflect on the things that mattered most to them And interestingly, since adolescents and young adults, they are often in a place in their lives where they can make changes. They haven't settled into a firm career. They haven't settled into or more often than not, long-term relationships. And so it was really interesting being diagnosed with cancer at this time. They found themselves able to sort of reorganize their lives in such a way that they could pursue their newfound purpose in life. Okay, so I hope that gives you a little flavor of some of the groups or some of the studies that we've conducted looking at purpose among diverse groups of young people. As I said earlier on, we were really interested, well, I should say we were also interested in how we might be able to cultivate purpose. So that first line of questioning was looking at purpose among diverse groups of young people. And the second line of questioning that really has motivated a lot of our research is, what can we cultivate purpose intentionally? Can we help young people discover purpose for their lives? So we've conducted a series of studies in that direction as well. And I want to share some of that research with you now. I think it's particularly important research because we see that purpose is associated with all of these broad range of benefits. I talked about physical and psychological health benefits associated with leading a life of purpose, and also with academic benefits associated with purpose. And yet, despite all these benefits, the rate of purpose is quite low. And so, like I said, we got interested in thinking about what are some steps we So here's where I'll get into some of the strategies that, that our research suggests are likely to be really helpful, really effective. So one way we can help students start the process of cultivating a purpose in their lives is to model purpose. We can talk to the young people in our lives about the things that give our lives purpose. And I think that as parents, I am a parent, and a lot of us find purpose in being parents. And sometimes we don't share that with the young people, with our children. Sometimes we don't, we may find purpose in the work that we do, and we may forget to share that with our children, that our work, although, keeps us busy, might be really meaningful to us and might be an important source of purpose. So I think it's an important opportunity to model purpose. Talk to the young people in your lives about the things that give your life purpose. And that will help give them a language for talking about and thinking about purpose. It also provides a model that is presumably somewhat attainable. It's not a model that feels, real far removed. It's a model that's very close to them. So modeling purpose, our research suggests, is very effective strategy for cultivating purpose among young people. Another thing that you can encourage the young people in your life to try is to reach out to friends and family members who know them well. So sometimes we don't know what our own purpose is, but the people who know us well have some good ideas. So we did this, we conducted a study where we asked young people to send emails to at least 5 adults who know them well. And these adults, they could be family friends, they could be teachers, they could be coaches, they could be employers. The idea is they needed to be somebody, presumably somebody outside the immediate family. Adolescents, as if you're a parent of a teenager, you probably well know, they tend to, of course, be shaped by the feedback we give them, but they tend to be particularly attuned to the feedback they get from the broader world. So, like I said, coaches, teachers, mentors, extended family members, employers, they want to send 5 emails to these adults. And the emails should just say, in a few sentences or less, please answer these following 3 questions for me about me. So the first question that you want to ask these folks to respond to is, what do you think I'm particularly good at? What do you think I really enjoy doing? And how do you think I will leave my mark? So the idea is that these 5 adults will reflect on these 3 questions in reference to the young person. And what happens is the young person tends to get these responses that can be really eye-opening. Like I said, although the individuals don't, young people may not know what their purpose in life is, but their family and friends may have a pretty good idea, or they may be able to offer some useful insight that can help the young person get focused or get started on their own process of self-reflection. So you don't have to do it via email, but that can be a useful way to do it. And if you as a parent want to help the young person, help them put together the email and maybe give the families and friends a heads up that this email is coming. Let them know they don't need to spend a lot of time responding, but that you hope they'll respond real quickly with their gut reaction. And I think that's important feedback to give or instructions to give to them, because you want to make sure that these adults, that they do respond. Sometimes sending out all these emails, if nobody responds, it can be a little demoralizing to the young person. So you might be able to help ensure that they select people who are really likely to respond. So that's a second strategy that you might try. Again, we've tested it out, and it seems to work pretty well. And even in a global pandemic, we can send out emails. Something else to think about is having conversations about long-term hopes and plans. So in our early study of purpose, we conducted hundreds of interviews where we'd ask young people what it is they want to accomplish in their lives and why. What do they really care about and why? We were asking about their purpose in life. And we were surprised by the feedback that we got. Young people would tell us at the end of the interview, hey, you recorded that. Can I get that recording? I said some good stuff and I don't want to lose track of that. Other times they'd, call us up after the interview and say, can I get a copy of that transcription? I really want to go back and sort of revisit some of the things that we talked about. So it made us wonder if maybe our conversation about purpose, this interview about purpose, if it wasn't a kind of unintentional intervention. We hadn't meant it to be, but there was so much interest in the interview. So as it turns out, we did surveys. We just randomly selected a subset of those individuals to participate in interviews. And then we were doing surveys again. So it was a perfect research design. We could compare those young people, their rates of purpose before and after the interviews, with those who were interviewed and those who weren't. And what we found was that, lo and behold, the young people who participated in this one time, about an hour-long conversation or interview about purpose, they showed significantly higher purpose scores at the second survey time. So that interview, just this one-time intervention, it really did help them think more deeply about their purpose in life and identify their purpose in life. So I think the takeaway here is that you want to really help young people engage in thoughts about the long term. Ask them about the things they really want to accomplish in their lives and really listen. Sometimes this can be a tough conversation for parents to have because parents are pretty invested in their young person. You have to kind of stand back and really listen to what the young person says and accept their responses. But you might be surprised how much they're talking about this, or thinking about this. And in your talking with them, you can help scaffold that thought process, deepen that thought process, and help them articulate what it is they're thinking about much, much better. Another strategy that you might think about is maybe a little counterintuitive, but it's this idea of practicing gratitude. So over the years, I've conducted literally hundreds of interviews with young people about their purposes in life. And I've been struck by the number of times that young people will talk about the ways in which an experience of gratitude inspired a sense of purpose in their lives. So for example, I always think about this young woman I interviewed in Indiana. She was actually a freshman in college, and she was studying to become a teacher. And she's talked really passionately about the kind of empathic and caring and supportive teacher that she wanted to be. And I'd say, okay, that's great, that you want to be a teacher, but tell me more. Why is that important to you? And she said, well, I don't want to be one of those teachers who clocks in and clocks out. I want to be one of those teachers who really makes a difference in her students' life. And we said, why? What makes that so important to you? And she said, when I was growing up, when I was young, I think in junior high is what she said, my parents went through this really rough divorce. And it didn't tell a lot of people, but I had this one teacher who noticed that I was struggling, and she really stepped up for me. She was there for me. She helped me. She listened to me. She cared for me, and it made a huge difference in my life. And I'm just so grateful for all that she did for me, that I want to be that kind of teacher for other students. So we hear these kinds of things again and again, how experiences of gratitude can inspire purpose. So we decided to kind of put that to the test. Is it really the case that cultivating gratitude might incline young people to think about their purpose in life? And again, we found out that it was. In fact, in some ways, cultivating gratitude can be at least as effective, if not more effective, approach to cultivating purpose. And I think the reason is that it's a lot easier for young people to focus on the blessings in their lives and the people who have blessed them than it is to tackle this big question of, what do I want to accomplish in my life? So if you are concerned that asking this big question to the young person in your life, that might just be a turnoff, focus instead on gratitude. So maybe encourage, every night around the dinner table, talk about 3 good things that happened, and focus on the way that, people were helpful and what it cost them to help and how you benefited from it. And you might have a young person write a gratitude letter, which is kind of like a thank you note, but written more in a general way, maybe to a coach or something, just saying how grateful they are for, all of the help and support that this person has provided them. Because we do tend to find we have this natural sense of kind of wanting to keep it even. And so when you focus on all of the blessings in your life and on the people that have helped you and have blessed you, it does seem to naturally incline you to start to think about, how do I want to give back? And that desire to give back can take the form of a purpose in life. Okay, so I promised I would talk a little bit about purpose too among younger people. Really, what I've focused on so far has been relevant to adolescents. And again, as I said, it's not the case that we expect 5, 6, 7, and 8-year-olds to be identifying a purpose in their life, but it's not too early to start to set the stage. And what I mean by that is you can help them think about ways that they can contribute to the world beyond themselves. I gave a talk at a school one time, and this kindergarten teacher told me how every day she would get her students, at the end of the day, they would have their circle time. And at the beginning of the school year, she said, what should be our goal for this year? And the students said, we want to be the best classroom on campus, in the whole school. And so they talked about, how could we do that? Well, we could be good friends to one another. We could be, good help to one another. And so the teacher really held them to it. And every day at the end of the day, she'd say, I want to know, what did you do to contribute to our classroom? What did you do to contribute to your friends? What steps did you take to make our community a better place? And I thought that was such a nice way to think about it. You're helping young people recognize that they are capable of contributing in positive ways to the world beyond themselves, and you're helping them find the meaning associated with doing so. And the hope is that later on in life, when they are developmentally ready to identify and commit to a purpose in life, they'll have the skills and the tools and the readiness to do so. Okay. So with that, I'm looking at our time and we're cutting it close here. I do want to wrap up, and I want to wrap up kind of where we started, which is with Viktor Frankel. I love this quote from his book on Man's Search for Meaning, where he talks about purpose. He says, quote, "One should not search for an abstract meaning in life. Everyone has his own specific vocation or mission in life to carry out a concrete assignment which demands fulfillment. Therein, he cannot be replaced, nor can his life be repeated. Thus, everyone's task is as unique as is his specific opportunity to implement it." So I hope that this has inspired you to think a little bit more about your own purpose in life, so that you can help the young people in your life identify and pursue a purpose for their lives. With that, I say thank you very much. And I think we're ready for questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kendall Bronk. That was brilliant. And I don't think it could be any more timely. Really and truly, right? Everybody, parents and caregivers and folks who are online with us tonight. We have some great questions, Kendall, so let's see what we can get to, okay? This, I think, is a really good one. Do you have any recommendations for how to get our kids less involved with image, for example, as seen through social media, and move more towards purposeful activities and goals? I think that's
Yeah,
a good question.
this is a challenge, right? I think any of the strategies that I suggested can be really helpful. I tend to find that young adults are often surprised at how ready the young people are in their lives to think about these topics. You can broach the topic and at first the young and when I say the topic, I mean, what is it that you really want to accomplish in your life? How are you going to use your special skills and your special talents to make a difference? And what are the issues and challenges that you want to tackle? And I think just helping the young person to, focus on those things and have those conversations, I think you might be surprised at how developmentally ready young people, adolescents are. And, I can't say that that means all materialism is going to disappear, but when you're really busy in pursuing a direction that really matters to you, like I said, it just tends to pull you through the chaos that you're dealing with. So I would suggest trying to model purpose, talk about the things in your own life that help give you meaning and purpose that really matter to you, and have these conversations with your young person about what kinds of things they want to accomplish and how they might think about using their skills to make a positive difference.
Thank you. And I think I've heard you say before, Dr. Bronk, that even just asking your young people about what gives them purpose actually can add to their sense of purpose.
Exactly. Yeah. There's that, like I said, that one-time interview, we didn't expect it to be an intervention, but just having that conversation, I don't think that it helped, there was absolutely no purpose and suddenly there was purpose. I think what it does is it helps them articulate their thoughts. Young people, they are thinking about these things. Like I said, they're thinking about identity, and that's tied to what they want to accomplish in their lives. So they're already there. What we need to do is help them tap into that, not to ignore those thoughts, but to really flesh them out and to better articulate them.
Yes, thank you. And many of our attendees asked about the 3 questions that you mentioned in that intervention. And we promised to send out a link to your toolkit that does include those questions. It seems like a great thing to do as a family, no matter really probably what age your child.
That's right. That's right. And the only thing I would say, we've had nothing but positive experiences, except if adults don't get back to the young person. So that's where I think parents can play a role. Help them select adults who are likely to respond, and maybe even reach out to the adults and say, no pressure. This doesn't need to be a lengthy response, but just give us your gut reaction, a few sentences. And so you can ensure the young person gets some responses. And,
okay, good advice, because that probably would be discouraging. I like this question, basic, but a really good one. Could you elaborate on the difference between a purpose and having goals?
Good. Well, I think that goals are one important component of purpose. So it's just sort of one component of it. So like I said, purpose is this goal orientation, and maybe it's not exactly a goal. A goal is usually something you could fully achieve. A purpose may not be, right? If your purpose is to, help address climate change, or help eradicate homelessness, or even as a parent to raise really happy, healthy, well-adjusted children, well, you can never fully accomplish that, right? Every kid's going to have a bad day in our own lives. We may not be able to completely eradicate purpose, or I'm sorry, we don't want to eradicate purpose, but eradicate homelessness. But we should be able to make progress toward it. So I'd say it's a goal of sorts, but it's not always a goal that can easily and clearly be accomplished. It's definitely one that can be made progress toward. In addition to the goal orientation, though, we recognize it as a purpose when it's a goal that's really meaningful. I think we have a lot of goals in our lives, some of which we care about more than others. And then I think the third dimension of purpose, so it's a goal that's particularly meaningful, and it is inspired by a desire to make a difference in the broader world. So we have many goals that are very self-focused, and that's not bad. We should have that. But a purpose is really inspired by a desire to contribute to the world beyond the self. And in fact, you may have purposes, that you pursue because they're a lot of fun and they allow you to contribute to the world beyond yourself. So it's okay if you have multiple motivations, but at least one of those needs to be the desire to contribute to the broader world. So there's definitely some overlap, but I hope that clarifies how they're not exactly one and the same.
I think so. Thank you, Kendall. A few people are asking about why the number of students with goals in the US is kind of low. Is that recent? Does that have anything to do with sort of the materialism of our society or culture?
Well, that is a good question. And I have to be honest that I don't know for sure what the answer is, but my sense is that we sometimes find ourselves with too many options. And there are so many different things that young people can do today. And that hasn't always been the case, right? And there used to be more of a clear path that young people followed, but now many of the things that, career-wise that we're studying in school, the careers that exist today are not even likely to be the careers that exist in the future. So how can you develop a really clear goal around what you want to pursue if you don't even know what's likely to be available? So I think that there's just so many options, and we're living in such a fast pace of change that it can be hard to nail down goals. But I still think when you think about purpose, like I said, it's a goal orientation. And so you might think, it's really important to me to contribute somehow to these, maybe it's issues of health, maybe it's issues in the environment, maybe it's through the arts, maybe it's through, to identify the general area and to start to think about what are the skills and talents that you have and how could you begin to apply them. The truth is that we don't just have one purpose in life. We tend to have purposes in life. And I'd like to even talk about the seasons of purpose. I find a lot of purpose in being a parent. And until I had children, that wasn't a purpose for my life because I didn't have children. I also find a lot of purpose in my career. And when I was younger, it was really important to me to pursue a career that was meaningful to me, but I didn't know exactly how I would do it. So I don't think we have to be quite so concrete when we think about purposes. And if you are a little more abstract about what is the general area you want to move in and what are some ways you could imagine having a positive impact in that direction, that should enable you to still discover purpose despite the fact that there are lots of options available and we don't know exactly what the future is going to bring.
Isn't that true? So I have a 3-day-old grandchild. We will definitely be asking her what her purpose is.
Oh, good.
So Dr. Bronk, it's quite obvious to all of us listening to you that you found your purpose in life. But the question I'd like to end with tonight is, and I bet I know how you'll answer this, is what gives you hope?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, we just had a lab meeting. I couldn't have planned it better. And we're doing a 3-year longitudinal study where we're interviewing young people. We're following them over time. And we're looking at the way that their thinking about college and career is shaped by purpose. And we were talking about how in interviewing these young people really does restore hope, because young people they tend to be optimistic. They tend to be very idealistic and very hopeful. That's even despite the pandemic. And so tapping into the things that really matter to young people definitely fills me with hope.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much tonight, Dr. Kendall Cotton Bronk, for your wonderful presentation on purpose. I know as a parent and a new grandparent, you've given us so much to think about. And attendees, we promise we will follow up with a link to her website that has that toolkit, plus a whole lot of other materials that you can use to work with your own family. So again, thank you, Dr. Bronk, for a wonderful presentation. Take care, everybody, and stay well. And we hope to see you again soon. Good night.